Good evening, ladies and gents, wherever you may be around the world, and welcome to Splendid Isolation History number 38. And this is part 2 of our Anglo-Saxon resistance after the Battle of Hastings in 1066. We did part 1 a few weeks ago, and I've been waiting so we can get our 2 main guests back for part 2. As always, to give people time to join the stream, etc., I'm going to start us off with a tune.
Take up the white man's burden, send forth the best ye breed. Go bind your sons to exile, to serve your captives' need. To wait in heavy harness on flooded folk and wall. Your new gods sullen peoples have devil and have child. Take up the white man's burden, in patience to abide, to veil the threat of terror and check the show of pride. By open speech and simple, 100 times made plain, to seek another's profit and work another's gain. Take up the white man's burden, the savage wars of peace. Fill full the mouth of famine and bid the sickness cease. And when your goal is nearest, the end for others sought, what's love and heed and folly, bring all your hopes to naught. Take up the white man's burden, no tawdry rule of kings, but toil of serf and sweeper, the tale of common things. The ports ye shall not enter, the roads ye shall not tread. Go make them with your living and mark them with your dead. Take up the white man's burden and reap his old reward. The blame of those ye better, the hate of those ye guard. The cry of those ye humor are slowly towards the light. Why brought ye us from bondage, a loved Egyptian night? Take up the white man's burden, ye dare not stoop to less, nor call too loud on freedom to cloak your weariness. By all ye cry or whisper, by all ye leave or do, the silent, sullen people shall weigh your gods and you. Take up the white man's burden, have done with childish days, the lightly profit laurel, the easy ungrudged praise. Come down to search your manhood through all of thankless years. No age with give or wisdom, the judgment of your peers. Take off the white man's burden through all of thankless years.
And that was, of course, the excellent Chris Gard. If you're into good music and you want to hear good music from a musician who's on the right, do go and check out Chris Gard's channel on YouTube. He's got some really nice, good stuff on there. And he's got real talent as well. Okay, now, for anyone who hasn't seen part one of this was Splendid Isolation History number 35, so you can go and check that out. I did actually put it up on X, on Twitter, if anyone wants to go and watch part 1. This is part 2. I'm sorry it's a bit, it's about 3 weeks later than we did part 1, but I had to wait until we could get AI, aka William Granville, and Mitch back together again, because this is their stream. I know very little about this period of English and British history, to my shame, but these chaps do. So take it away, guys.
All right, so we're going to be talking about the we've last, just a quick recap. We talked about the rising in Exeter after Hastings, which was sort of coalesced around the mother of King Harold Godwinson, Guther. And we talked about the siege of Exeter, the campaign that William marched out through December, so during the winter. We also talked about how he used this as basically as a staging ground to see how many he had the Norman knights with him, but also how many English or Anglo-Saxon levies would sort of come to his arms, and there was quite a decent number that did. And we talked about him putting down the sort of the rebellion that was forming in the West. And so now we're going to be talking about the very same in the North. And one thing that is, and I think Mitch would also say, is all the sources, all the chronicles, whether they be Anglo-Saxon or Norman or Anglo-Norman, and even the Norman ones are critical of William's actions, mainly after his death, but are critical of his actions in the what is known as the Harrying of the North. One person who is probably most favourable to William is Orderic Vitalis, who, and this is a quote from the Ecclesiastical History of England and Normandy. The king stopped at nothing to hunt his enemies. He cut down many people and destroyed homes and land. Nowhere else had he shown such cruelty. This made a real change. To his shame, William made no effort to control his fury, punish the innocent with the guilty. He ordered that crops and herds, tools and food be burnt to ashes. More than 100,000 people perished of starvation. I have often praised William in this book, but I can say nothing good about this brutal slaughter. God will punish him. And again, it's important to remember at that time the population of Anglo-Saxon England was 2 million, maybe 2.5 million. So 100,000.
AI. My reading is that it's about 4 million.
Is it? Oh, it might be a bit more than
even so, 100,000 deaths is enormous.
I mean, proportionately, yeah.
Yeah. So, some historians have said that this was some sort of genocide. Other historians, and I frankly don't know, I just haven't read enough about this, but other historians say that William's army was actually too small, and particularly the number of men he could afford to take into the north of England, to actually kill 100,000 people, even if many of those people simply died of starvation because he burnt their crops and killed their animals.
Yeah, I know, because that was one of the main incidents that William felt justified in order to do this. Was one time where 3,000 of his men were slaughtered in York, including his lieutenant, a guy called Robert de Comines, who's Flemish, I believe. So he's essentially a mercenary. But yeah,
he was warned, though, Mitch. That guy was warned by an Anglo-Saxon church guy. He was warned that they were going to ambush him, and he just ignored them. So, partly his own downfall.
One thing that Mark Morris, now on the question of the genocide stuff, because Mark Morris does actually talk about it in his book, the Norman Conquest, and what's quite interesting is his looking at the chronicles here. What had happened, and this is what Mark Morris thinks, and I'm actually inclined to agree with him. What happened? He led an army up to York. And at that time, historically speaking, as well, during the reign of the House of Wessex, when England was united, um, the North was even during that, even under Edward the Confessor and Harold briefly, it was somewhat um, not as in control as other parts, particularly in southern England. So it was all left to its own devices in some regard. There wasn't that great deal of control when due to topography and geography and things like that. But William marched up to York. At this time, his army really hadn't had a break. His knights hadn't had a break. His vassals who were with him, who mainly came from their holdings in Normandy or in the Flemish or in Brittany or Anjou, hadn't had this break. And while they was up there, you had the army wasn't being paid. There was a massive risk of mutiny, which he was told several times by I think even by his closest allies, his cousins, Courtevilles, were telling him about the risk of mutiny. And also there was another big thing was desertion in the ranks. There was a lot of desertion. I do think, and William supposedly said, while going up on the Yorkshire moors, like I think it was Saddleworth or somewhere like that, his response to their complaints was, "Well, go off and find food," or something like that. Do it yourself. So the sort of harrowing of the north, like the looting and the destroying and all that, some of it may have not been directly ordered by him, but it was an act of pure desperation, or just by men in his service, or just personal greed by deserters, just going around looting, raping, killing, for gold and whatever.
Of course, the north of England, unlike the Midlands and the south, but the north of England was the Danelaw area. So there were quite a lot of Danish settlers who, by this stage, after 1066, had intermingled with the Anglo-Saxons in that area. And I think that even today, the difference between a northern and a southern accent is partly the result of that, although Mitch is our linguistics expert on this channel. So I'm going to hand that over to Mitch.
Yeah, even like the Godwin family, you notice Harold Godwinson, Harold, but it's a Scandinavian name, as well as his mother's name, Giffer, also been that was a popular name for the time among Englishmen, was Giffer. Tostig was also another one. So even like as a legacy of Canute the Great, let alone the Danelaw from the sons of Ragnar Lothbrok, the north of England, especially you got the East Midlands and Yorkshire way. The Tyneside, not so much, where it was settled a lot by Scandinavians. I mean, you can tell it by you notice whenever you have like a town or city or village ending in B, or like like Derby, or you have places like Scunthorpe, another place. Yeah, that tells a lot of Scandinavian influence. It's like the same with York, where we call it York because it's descended from the name Jorvik that the Scandinavians gave it. Even though before that, we English called it Everwich, which if that form of a name survived into modern English, we'd be saying Everwick, because Ever refers to a boar, I believe, and Wick just means trade in town. Same with how London used to be called London Witch or London Wick. So the thing about even like historians can trace how in the mid 11th century there were plenty of Scandinavian words that were seeping into English, like for example, the word knife or kniv, as it was known back then. But we just spelled the word slightly differently to how they did it over in Denmark, which is where, of course, the main Scandinavian settlers came from. And it would be accurate to say, even with the Norman conquest, an Anglo-Scandinavian culture still did manifest. For example, one of the oldest texts of Middle English came from the 12th century, and it was written by a monk by the name of Orm. Orm is a Scandinavian way of saying the word worm, but back then the word worm meant like a beast, like it didn't mean worm in the way we mean it now. So,
Mitch, even you'll tell me if I'm right, but I think I am. Even the term Saxons, it comes from the Sax, and the Sax was like a British, English, or originally Anglo-Saxon, obviously, big knife, a little bit like a modern Bowie knife. That you could use almost like a short sword, and that most people carried back then. You could use it as a tool, but you could also use it in war. You can go, if someone wants to Google one, they can. But that's where the Saxons got their name, is from the Sax, which is, as I say, a big, nasty knife, basically.
Good for hunting. Good for hunting.
Good for hunting, but also pretty good for war as well. AI, and I don't know. I find this stuff interesting because I think the north-south divide in England, and I've spoken to Mitch about this before. I don't know if I have with you, AI, but I think the original north-south divide in England really comes from the Danelaw and what have you, mostly.
I mean, I actually think, and maybe this is just maybe pushing the boat out a bit too much. I actually think it may come down to the settlement of the Angles and the Saxons, because when you look at the areas that the Angles settled in, sailing up the Humber River and the estuary around there, and then the Saxons forming their kingdoms in southern England, along with the Jutes, you can actually see somewhat of a north-south divide. But I mean, at the end of the day, the Saxons and the Jutes came from the same region. There's exactly the same place near enough as the Danes, the Danegold. So if you think about it, when the Danes showed up, and I think a couple monks at the time would refer to them with the Danes, particularly as brothers or cousins. They didn't really see themselves. And they could understand each other very clearly. They could understand.
Also,
I mean,
AI, Harold's best troops at the Battle of Hastings, and also before that at Stamford Bridge when he actually beat the Danes, but at Hastings as well, his best troops were his housecarls. Now again, that's largely it's a Viking Danish thing, I believe.
yeah,
And one of the main weapons of these guys was a gigantic, like 6 foot long Dane axe. And most modern historians, military historians who I've read about, believe that's basically an anti-cavalry weapon, really. That's what it was for. It was because it could slice horses to bits. It was just so powerful. But as I say, guys, I don't know a lot about this, but I'll add little bits when I can.
Yeah, because the other thing, I don't know where the Jutes get their name from. I know like there's a part of Denmark they came from, which is still to this day called Jutland or Jutland.
Jutland, yeah.
Yeah. The Angles. Angeln is the place in Germany, it's close to Holstein, where they came from. The thing is, like Angles, I reckon that they settled England so densely because their native homeland, Schleswig-Holstein, was so swampy and marshy that whenever the North Sea decided to be troublesome, which is a lot of the time, and if they had their lands flooded, they'd lose land. It's kind of like what we think of Holland, like the Low Countries. So many Angles probably moved over to over here, And that's probably one reason why the Angles conquered so much land, because you have East Anglia, which similar land. And the thing is, like, I mean, Survivor Joe said about this, where East Anglia, there's pretty much no Celtic genetics in that neck of the woods, and everyone we can't find any mass graves, but it's heavily hinted that basically the Celts who lived in that area were all driven off because that land is prime area to do guerrilla warfare. And you
And
imagine,
it's quite ironic because that East Anglia was the home of the famous Iceni tribe. You know, the Boadicea, Boudica, the famous Iceni tribe that went to war with the Romans.
yeah, that's
Yeah. One thing also we'll talk about briefly is when William was crowned king. One thing you notice as well is that it's not most of the killing of the Anglo-Saxon nobility took place on the battlefield of Hastings. You know, of course, there wasn't afterwards. There wasn't so much of killing. It was that Anglo-Saxon nobles were just dispossessed. Their properties were just taken from them. Their titles and properties and rights were taken from them. The only and even that extended even into the monastic circles, which was a bit controversial at the time. But one thing that was quite interesting is what triggers the rebellions, particularly in northern England, was that in Northumbria, because there had been a succession problem of the Earl of Northumbria, the William appointed Robert de Comyns as the Earl, instead of like I think an Anglo-Saxon one.
I would just add one thing. Comyn, that's a Flemish area, so it's heavily hinted that he must have been a mercenary. It wasn't like a usual lord. Like,
yeah,
William was.
probably a Flemish. Yeah, probably a Flemish and title. And of course Bishop Ethelwyn, who Duke referenced earlier, was the one that warned about not putting a Norman in charge. Warned about a rebel army that would be mobilized against him. Now Robert rode it out into Durham with a party of men on the 28th of January, 1069. So the Harrow North is 1069 to about 1070, 71. And him and his men were surrounded and slaughtered by rebels. So this was what triggered William's response, where he returned, marched up, and this is when you had the besiege of York, and the sacking. I mean, rebellions also did take
Guys,
place at this.
can I ask, is what Key Buckley says here that I just put up, is that true? Because I've never heard of that, but if it
Yeah,
was...
Yeah.
so during his coronation, there was Londoners who outside Westminster were sort of cheering and celebrating, and William and his knights within Westminster thought that this was like some sort of uprising or some sort of attempted fight back, and so in a panic, knights went running out there with swords and just started cutting down the Londoners. Yeah.
See, this is another thing I'd say about, if you read about the harrying of the North, and you read they killed 100,000 people, although presumably a lot of those people died of starvation during the winter because they burnt their crops or stole them and also murdered their animals.
Well, it was more than that, It was more than that because they actually they affected the land itself. I mean, they actually created a scenario where I think it was Mark Morris said that the agricultural aspect, the land was worthless because of what they had done to it.
Yeah, they called it wasteland in the Doomsday Book.
Yeah.
But
I will say,
also they claim to have killed 80,000 oxen, and of course in those days Britain didn't yet have the beautiful Shire horses that were part of England's pride in the 18th century, for example. There were they're still around today in small numbers. But those things didn't exist. So most ploughing in England was done by oxen. And they say these guys killed 80,000 oxen. But given in the 1060s and early 1070s, you could only really kill someone with like a sword or a crossbow or something like that. Killing 100,000 people and 80,000 oxen, that's a big ask for a fairly small force. But you guys know much more about this than I do.
Yeah, Mitch, go ahead.
I was going to say my home county of Staffordshire, so it was something like in 1066 we had something like nearly 500 mills, I believe. By the time you get to the Doomsday Book, there's no more than 45 mills left because of how depopulated my home county was. Now, I don't know how true that is. I mean, because it seems like a massive depopulation to do that.
Yeah, Florence of Worcester, who was was writing in the 11th century, so within living memory, said that his army destroyed crops and settlements, forced rebels into hiding, and that what he did was his army split up into smaller units, and they were basically sent out to burn and loot and terrify the population. From the Humber to the Tees, William then burnt whole villages, slaughtered the inhabitants. Food stores, livestock were destroyed. So anyone surviving in the initial massacre would succumb to starvation over the winter. But then there's Simone of Durham, who was like a Norman source on this, said that the famine affected everybody, not including William's men, because of the road and because of the winter. They were sort of somewhat semi-stuck in the north. And this is where you have reports of apparently cannibalism, the desperation of cannibalism, but also the reason why ox and horses were killed, as long with dogs and things, was because it was also from William's camp, because they were starving as well. So I'm inclined to believe that there was a bit of both, in the fact that because they went around destroying everything, and because you had depopulation, and also a lot of people, there was people internally were displaced. I mean, in you had refugees who were traveling all the way down to Worcestershire, to Evesham Abbey, for example, and others went to lowland Scotland. Some of them even settled in parts of the along the Hardknott Pass of the old Hadrian's Wall, set up in the old Hadrian's Wall to get away from.
Woodpit 420 is saying, how did they damage the land so much to make it barren? When the Doomsday Book is talking about wasteland, what they mean is it's not farmland. And all you need to do to stop land being farmland is to kill the villagers. And as AI and Mitch were just saying, their oxen that they use for ploughing and stuff. If you do that, you make it wasteland. You don't have to do anything else. You don't have to destroy irrigation. And irrigation's never been a big deal in England and Britain, because we get a lot of rain, guys. But
back then, I guess that's actually quite important, because what he talked about irrigation. Back then, we had more forests, we had more as you said, wasteland, but you also had
far more forests.
But you also had meadows.
Understand something? Britain in those days still had brown bears and wolves, and it wasn't the safe little place it is now.
Yeah, And you also had meadows. You had lots and lots of meadows all around. I mean, the English countryside, which we imagine today, was very, very radically different back then, you know, 1070. Very different. You know, and so if you think about it, York was basically decimated and destroyed. Many in Durham, many, not just, it wasn't just the countryside, the areas which would have subsidized the agricultural economy were just completely done in. And it took, I mean, Mark Morris said it took about what, into the 12th century to like the late 12th century for somewhat of a recovery, where Northern England, you know, sort of bounced back. I mean, I know some have even suggested, and I don't know if how.
Isn't it true that even today, if you look at the settlement patterns in the north of England, they're more regular than they are in the Midlands and the south of England. And this is because many of the old settlements in the north were actually destroyed.
Yeah, yeah. Well, as I said, a lot of refugees went south. Some went north into Scotland, into the border areas. You know, some went west, and it was. I mean, a vast area. I mean, I know I say Yorkshire, but the Norman, the way the areas that Normans considered Yorkshire included, you know, Lancashire and quite far down south into the Midlands, you know, near Mitch's neck of the woods. So it was a vast area that was affected. I mean, basically half of England, if you wanted to be precise. And um, I've actually got here because one thing that was, I mean, and it'd be interesting to know because you know, I think the reason why the Normans, quite a few Normans afterwards, were critical of William because of this, was because all the lands that were given to his allies, Norman allies, basically ruled over estates which made a pretty decent turnover. So, like for example, you have Earl Hugh, Earl of Chester, who was of a Norman house. His valued estates that he was expected to receive in 1066 was around £260, and then after in the estate in 1086 it was at £10, £10.5, for example. So all these, and there's the same thing is all over. You see this drastic
It's
reduction in
about
value.
half. It's about half AI, isn't it? In most of the northern parts of England, the value of the land goes down to at least half.
Oh, in some cases, Iron Duke is actually like upward of 90%. There's one case, I think it's Drogo de la Brevoie, who's given the title of he was given lands in northern eastern England, in Holderness, Skipsey Castle. The value of the land was like, you know, reduced to about, you know, by 90%. It was extreme as that in some places, and of course this did anger some of the, you know, Normans, because they were like, "Hold on a sec, you're giving me like this worthless. I've invested," because all these lords, yeah, being loyal vassals, invested a lot of their own money and time and resources into this, and they didn't really get anything. Well, they got a smouldering wreck.
Worth pointing out to modern people, of course, because our teaching of history in schools these days is so fucking pathetic. It's worth pointing out that £10 in 1070 was an enormous amount of money. That was a lot of money. Okay, it wasn't 2 pints of beer as it is today. It was actually like a lot. Like a British soldier in the 19th century earned £1 a day, basically.
Yeah, and it's I know one thing the Normans did was they incentivised a lot of Flemish and Northern French peasants to work the land, which is one thing Survivor Jive mentions about his genetic studies regards to England. Southern England and parts of the Midlands have some French DNA kicking about. The fact that there's none in Northern England kind of tells you that even with even with William the Conqueror trying to incentivise continental peasants to settle the land, they all stopped around like Norfolk and parts of the Midlands. They wouldn't go up north. This is why, for example, you have Norwich, like their football team are called the Canaries, because Norwich was, of course, big, well known for its textile industry, and the Flemish workers often brought canaries with them when they were working. So that kind of tells you like some patterns of migration. But yeah, the north was just it was reduced for a long time. No one would move up there. And the north. I think the Percys are the oldest family in neck of the woods, and they settled there like 1070.
They actually had, William of Percy, who was the first one to settle. He lost about like £40 revenue of what he was expecting, which was a lot, but it wasn't as bad. I mean, I think the one guy who actually had like who actually did well out of this was a chap called Odo the Crossbowman, who actually made money. He actually made money. I do wonder how he did that. Maybe he brought some farming. I can't find much about Odo the Crossbowman. I think he might have just been like a mercenary who just got a bit of land, and was able to, turn the land around. But everyone else seems to have lost a considerable amount. I mean, like Gilbert of Grant lost a staggering amount. Percy didn't too. I think the one guy who really did get a really sort of not so much a rotten deal, but wasn't very happy was Count Alan of Brittany, who was already a count, and his land revenue was again down. The value of the estates was considerably down than what it had been in 1066 when you're looking at the Domesday Book. Ralph Mortimer again. The Welsh marchers wasn't doing so well compared to in Herefordshire. I mean, it affected it because of the harrying north. It actually affected the entire economy all over in some regards. I mean, not to get all econ on this, but it had a widespread effect. Beyond the economy side of it, it had a widespread effect, even as far down as Devon, Somerset, Wiltshire.
Yeah,
it's like I think like Dorset.
We did talk, guys. Guys, we did talk on episode 1 of this. If people want to go back and listen to that, we did talk about there were rebellions all over England, including in the southwest and all over the place. So this wasn't just something that was confined to the north. But yeah, sorry guys.
I was just say, and I like so for example, I said my county had like 42 or 62 something like that mills by 1086, whereas I think like Dorset had like 272. Even though Staffordshire and Dorset had like similar size, like similar population size. So I kind of that even though before the conquest, there were hundreds of mills in my home county. So it's a matter of, and also as I mentioned,
and it was all good farmland as well, Mitch. Like none of this was terrible farmland. It was all pretty good actually.
Yeah, because now, you have like because one thing to bear in mind as well, like if you were affected by the harrying of the north, there was no social welfare state, because at least, like, for example, because before, like, for example, Reformation, you had monasteries, which pretty much were like a welfare state for people who work seasonal labour and such. But the problem was in 1066, there were no monasteries in northern England. So basically, if you were a farmer, you were entirely dependent upon your harvest being good, and if it wasn't, you were screwed. So when William and his
and your extended family, Mitch, of course, because in those days, families weren't like they are now, where 2 or 3 people or 4 people maybe.
Atomized,
There were extended families, but if your extended family couldn't help you, you were fucked, basically.
Yeah, and the problem was there was the monastery. Well, at this point, monastic land in northern England was also being um you had William was replacing abbots with and bishops with Normans, or even like in French. I mean, I think the Bishop of Exeter wasn't a Norman; he was actually from France. He was a French abbot. So you had change there.
I noticed someone mentioned pigs earlier. One of the reasons pigs were popular is that you could run them in the local woods and forests, and they would pretty much feed themselves.
Yes.
Because before the Enclosure Acts of the 18th century, which is a totally different subject, but before those, there were commons all over Britain, all over England anyway, where the ordinary people could like run anything, livestock, cow, pigs, you name it. They could run them there, and they were allowed to. And before the Enclosure Acts, this was very important. And yeah, Woodpit says yes. They used to. The pigs would eat acorns and all this stuff. They would. You didn't really have to feed them, so that was very useful for poorer people in the countryside back in the day.
Yeah. I know. I mean, slight detail of one interesting thing. So when so the reason we have Christmas in winter is because because technically Jesus, we reckon he was actually born in September, but we moved it in our neck of the woods here in northwestern Europe to basically midst of winter.
Also, partly for the Romans, Mitch, because of their festival that the Christian Church wanted to take over. But yeah, okay.
Yeah. So, but because in the Germanic tradition we used to have Yuletide. Nowadays we have Christmas. You have, and the thing was, middle of winter, you're having your massive feast because you can't really farm a field and you spend your time with your family a lot more. So you're gonna sell, especially with lords, will just have these massive feasts, of which you'll have a lot of pork or like you'd say turkey or chicken. Like so that's why and it's trying to think because the thing about the having in the north is that some people say it's genocide, and I go, I mean, when you look up the reasoning William had, basically he was frightened that because at this time in 1069 you had King Sven of Denmark. He sent his, I think it's a half brother Osbjorn to land an army in northern England because at this time you got factors that northern England, as I mentioned earlier, was Anglo-Danish. They had far more sympathy with the Danish than they ever had with the
Mitch and AI, I think I'm right in saying that William the Bastard, the so-called William the Conqueror, he ended up paying a Dane girl to get these guys to go home, didn't he?
Yeah, because the thing was, he burned down a lot of his northern farms, so they couldn't live off the north. Then they raided East Anglia, especially Ely Monastery for a bit, and then the thing was, they camped in East Anglia where they had to deal with some of the swampy conditions. In the end, they were just bribed to go back home because at this point the Danish wanted to cut their losses. Because it's worth noting that even though, because people say this was done for Edgar Atheling, because he was a claimant, because he was the last male of the House of Wessex. It's worth noting that the King of Denmark, Sven, he actually had a claim to the English throne, so he probably was doing it for his own reasons. But by the time he probably just wanted to cut his losses. So William pays him up a bunch of money, and that's it. It's like
and this guy moved to Scotland, didn't he? I think, guys, he moved to Scotland, and the Scottish king at the time ends up marrying his sister, I think.
Yeah. Malcolm Canmore, I believe his name was.
Yeah, King Malcolm. Was it Malcolm the Third or so? I can't remember now. But
the third.
Yeah, Malcolm the Third. Yeah. Yeah. What else can we talk about?
I mean, I suppose we can talk about Edgar Atheling.
We should also talk about the wife of King Malcolm of Scotland, who
Yeah,
is
Margaret.
known as the Pearl of Scotland, apparently, because she was quite a pretty woman, and she was an excuse for the Scottish kings to raid into northern England because they're trying to make things better for the English, supposedly. But also, and she's
Saint
a saint. I do believe she's a saint as well.
Saint Margaret of Scotland. Yeah, Saint Margaret of Scotland. But also known in my neck of the woods as Margaret of Wessex. Because of course she was um House of Wessex, but she was born in the Kingdom of Hungary in 1045.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that people don't realize about these days is that the European monarchies and aristocracies were much more closely linked than people realize they were now.
Well, particularly, like, I mean, for example, this is 1045. Hungary only became a Christian kingdom officially 45 years prior under King Stephen. So even at this time, I mean, they would have been referred to as the Migas, as the as
I've got to say to Keith Buckley in the chat, they weren't very cosmopolitan. Actually, what they were European Christians. They were all quite similar in many respects.
yeah.
One of the things that I always point out to people, and I don't know if Mitch and AI will agree with me, but I suspect they will, is that the difference between the Anglo-Saxons and the Danes and even the Normans, and of course the Normans were originally the Northmen. The difference between these people was marginal. It wasn't huge, to be honest.
No, I mean, for example, at this time, yes, the elite would have been Christian, they would have been educated, or they would have had people educated in court around them, and so they would have had, bishops and stuff, and that would have been the continuation of, Western civilization through that stuff, and also through like abbots and monasteries. I mean, for example, I mean, just a quick thing. Saint Margaret would have been born in Hungary 1045. Now, she was lived, effectively as an exile um, for some time. At the time she was born and growing up, the Hungarian population at large would have still been quite pagan. They would have been following traditional religions, and even we talked about it this time, yeah, and Survivor Jives talked about it as well. Even in England itself, at this point, there was still a lot of pagan influence in over the local population as well. So the the way that Christianity was viewed and the way that Christianity was, again, it's very different from what we consider. It wasn't like the knitted jumper brigade you see with the Church of England today. It was very different. Um,
Yeah, look, I've said this many times, AI, and I know you and Mitch agree with me. You would get a great, and I mean a great Christian king like Alfred the Great, who was a great Christian king. I think he'd been to Rome twice, but Rome in the Christian era. But he still claimed descent from Wotan, which is Woden if you're German.
Oh, Germans say Wotan, we say Woden. Probably.
Okay, sorry, but
Yeah.
you get what I mean.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, what would you describe? I would describe these people as, um, you know, practically they were, or the foundation of morality was pagan, but spiritually, thinking uh, um, above oneself was Christian. But on their morality and their foundation, like the societal foundation, was still very deeply pagan, because
Yeah,
that's what it
I,
was.
I would say for people who don't, so let's say you take Japan in World War II, they're only a few generations removed from what the samurai were. So even though they were using guns and had like stuff like a parliament and a constitution and so on, they fought in very similar lines to what the samurai were doing a century before. Likewise, yeah, it's like you can find like these papal uh, dignitaries going to England. They would complain about how the English, even in the lead up to the conquest, they preferred to read Beowulf and Ingold as opposed to reading the Bible. So it was one of the things where we were a Christian population, but the old ways still kept around. In it,
Yeah.
it's like the reckon about the Northern Crusades, where kind of like a way for the papacy to get a lot of, because the Scandinavians were Christian, and it was kind of like, well, get those people to basically be like mad Vikings, but for the sake of the church, in dealing with the likes of the Lithuanians, the Balts, the Finnish, as well as the Estonians and so on. Yeah, and that's I know. One thing also bearing in mind is that people don't realize how Alfred the Great was known all over Europe. Like even in Russia, for example, there was Giffa, daughter of Howard Godwinson. She married a guy called Vladimir Monomach, who was probably like the last great ruler of the Kievan Rus in the late 11th century. He married her because she was English, and England was known all over for having resisted the Danes and having Alfred the Great, who was seen as probably Alfred the Great was towards Christendom what probably we think of what Julius Caesar would have thought of Alexander the Great. So that's one thing worth bearing in mind. So the Hungarian kingdom sheltering exiles of the House of Wessex. I mean, that's not really a big deal when you think about how well known the House of Wessex was among all royal houses in Europe.
Very, very good point, Mitch. Very good point. People don't realize that Alfred the Great, his fame was like really big because like the only people who actually successfully resisted the various Danish Viking invasions, they were the Anglo-Saxon English. They're the only people who did it, really.
Well, in Europe up to that point, I mean, during the age of Charlemagne and on the death of Charlemagne, the two major Christian powers would have been the Frankish Carolingian Empire and the Holy Roman Empire, the Carolingian Empire, and the Kingdom of Mercia. Mercia at that point was like the main Anglo-Saxon kingdom in the world. It was um, had sovereignty over its neighbours and was a very powerful, wealthy kingdom. And of course, and then it was completely wiped out by the Danes, by the Vikings. So yeah, you know, Wessex was quite at that point obscure, and then it rose from it, as like you said, the last great house. And it's quite interesting because to the south it was with the Europeans, their conflict was with the rise of the Islamic caliphates and the incursions into um Italy and of course in Spain. And for us it was the Norse Vikings and their incursion. So um yeah, that I would say that's probably why there was you know quite a well known, because really we were I mean the Slavs and the Balts in the east, in what's now Russia. I mean the Rus, the Kievan Rus, the Ruriks were believed to be of Norse descent. It was really only England that really did like put a stop to it. Oh,
And also, don't forget, guys, that after 1066, many English noblemen Anglo-Saxon English noblemen and their supporters actually moved to Byzantium, and we've spoken about this on this stream several times. They moved to Byzantium, which was the last of the Roman Empire. It was the Eastern Roman Empire. Byzantium is a modern Western and largely German term for that, but it was actually the Eastern Roman Empire. And many Anglo-Saxon noblemen and their professional soldiers, they moved there, and like the Vangarian Guard of the Eastern Roman emperors after 1066 became mostly English.
Yeah. And then you had that awkward meeting with the Normans of Sicily and the Anglo-Saxon vanguard in Constantinople during the First Crusades. You know, that sort of awkward interaction, like hello, old enemies, sort of thing.
Well, I know Mitch, for example, knows a bit about. There was a fairly big English settlement in the Crimea at one stage, in the Crimean Peninsula, which was basically Anglo-Saxon English guys who were settled there by the Eastern Roman emperors in Byzantium. I mean, but Mitch knows way more about that than I do.
I mean, there's not really much written about it. All we know is they created a place called that the Eastern Romans called Nova Anglia or New England.
Yeah.
And I mean, there is a bit of a meme map that pops up on music, you know, where it's like you have Crimea, and it's basically like, oh, New London, or you might have, let's say, a place further up north called Berkhamsted, or New Berkhamsted, or you know, so on. But yeah, that was the thing. Yeah, so you have William the Conqueror and his successors. They encourage a lot of Anglo-Saxon nobles to just emigrate if they don't, and then their land is their lands are distributed to more noblemen of Norman, Flemish, and so on. Yeah, you have as there was Edgar the Atheling, who, he was born. I think he was so. He was a teenager. He was like I think he was born in like 1050, if I remember correctly. And he died when he was 75 in 1125. And you'd have like situations where after William the Conqueror had died, his sons, like for example, his eldest son, Robert Curthose, he would often use Edgar the Atheling as a pawn against his own brothers because Curthose was not given the throne because basically he usurped the title of a Duchy of Normandy from his father, and that caused a lot of internal family drama between William and his eldest son. Robert Curthose, he's going, okay, well, if I'm not going to have it in Kingdom of England, then no one in my family will. So he was willing to put Edgar the Atheling on the throne while fighting against Henry I. But that wasn't to be. And yeah, Edgar Atheling, he just spent a lot of time just wandering around. I mean, one time, his sisters, as well as a load of other English renegades, were in Scotland. William the Conqueror, actually, he went up into Scotland, rampaging in a place. I mean, there was what was called a Peace of Abernethy, where Malcolm said, okay, in return for a sort of non-aggression pact and being allowed to, and being pretty much, marrying Margaret and not being forced to annul that marriage, he would force out any and all English claimants and rebels within Scotland. So they were all turfed out. And the other went to, as I said, the Varangian Guard, Ireland, to help the Godwin family, or they probably went elsewhere. Like after and the other thing was, and this is really weird how this came to happen, but so the sons of Harold Godwinson, after they tried and failed in the southwest to take back the throne, they then end up in the Baltic, where some of them they end up settling in Lithuania, of all places, and they are the progenitors of the Gediminid dynasty. The Gediminids, by the way, who are the
Lithuanian, yeah.
Lithuanian Grand Duke. They create the Great Duchy of Lithuania that stretches all the way to like the shores of like, Odessa.
Most of Western Russia. If you were to look at a map, it's most of it's Belarus and most of Western Ukraine and into Russia as well.
Yeah, and from a Gediminas, you have the family who come after them, the Jagiellonians, who later create the Polish Lithuanian Commonwealth. So
they remained. I mean, while elements of their house that ruled over in the Russian-speaking lands became Orthodox, the main house remained Lithuanian pagan until 1386, where when he the Grand Duke was married to the Polish Queen Consort. He converted officially to Roman Catholicism along with his main house and Lithuania itself. Quite late on.
That's really interesting, guys. But one of the things that strikes me about this is you have these Englishmen, these Anglo-Saxon Englishmen, who do great voyages all over the bloody world.
Oh, you'll like this one, Iron Duke. We're talking about Edgar Etheling. Now, in his time of exiles, he was, of course, going at wars against the Normans. There is a point though where he actually does like join up, re-announces his allegiance to the conqueror, to William and the Normans, and then him and the retinue of men go to Norman Apulia, which is in southern Italy, the Norman territories in Italy, and he spends time down there, and then I believe he even takes part in the First Crusade. I think operating an English fleet off the coast of Syria.
Cool. Yeah, really cool. But look, one of the things I wanted to talk about on this stream is that because of William the Bastard's invasion and the Norman conquest, a lot of early English history and myth has been lost. A lot of the Anglo-Saxon early history and myth has been lost. But one of the things we do still have, of course, is Robin Hood. And Robin Hood, importantly, is an Anglo-Saxon nobleman who's been dispossessed, although he's still a loyal subject of Richard the Lionheart, who of course is off on his crusades, defeating Saladin, which he and his English soldiers did fairly frequently, it has to be said, in the Third Crusade. But what do you guys think about the Robin Hood myths and what have you?
I know AI is much more of a TV series than I have, but there's that Robin Hood TV series.
I haven't. I've watched like the first episode, and I was having lunch, and my dad was around, and we were watching it. And I think Mitch, you'll know what part of the first episode, but there was a conversation between I think the sheriff of Nottingham, who was meant to be a Norman, and then a Saxon. And it was when he said, "Well, the Normans said we brought Christianity to you here." I just like nearly choked, and I just burst out in laughter. And that was it.
That was a total fucking lie. But anyway, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I have to wonder what I don't know what angle they were going with that, because they were claiming, oh well, the Normans brought Christianity. I'm like, well, I mean,
it was actually the other way around. The Saxons brought a lot of Christianity when the Northmen settled in Normandy. I mean, the Anglo-Saxons were Christian. The Northmen, like Rollo and his retinue, and the Scandinavians that settled there, were pagan, and it was the French. It was the West Frankish monarch who had to convert them, had to actually promote Christianity among their ranks.
Yeah. It's like Charlemagne. He had because he had an advisor by the name of Alcuin, who advised him, look, if you're going to convert the Northern Germans, as well as perhaps the Scandinavians in future to Christianity, you have to recruit Anglo-Saxons because they speak. Because at this time, the difference between between Old English and a lot of other Germanic languages, including High German, wasn't really that different. Like, but we could understand each other fairly well. Like, it used to be said that an Englishman could travel from, like, let's say England, he could travel from like central Norway all the way down to like Austria, and he would not be misunderstood, just only speaking Old English. Like, there'd be some teething problems as we have certain sound in Old English that continental Germanic languages didn't have, like the letter W. But by and large, yeah, you could not be misunderstood.
Mitch, a bit like a Frenchman, a Portuguese man, or a Spaniard can more or less understand each other. They really can, you know. There are quite a few words which are different, but in general terms, they can make themselves understood.
Yeah, it's like let's say you take someone from Buenos Aires in Argentina and you drag them all the way to Sicily. That person that Argentine could speak the Sicilian dialect in the space of a few hours, because not just the fact that, you know, Argentina of course had a lot of Italian immigration, but also it's just the Romance languages just being very similar. Like, I mean, even if you like, because I know, slight tangent, but if I was in charge of schools, I would have everyone be taught Latin, because if you know Latin, the Romance languages like Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, etc., become a lot easier.
Mitch, I think I'm right in saying they're all from Vulgar Latin, aren't they? Pretty much.
Yeah, they're all dialects of like what was common Latin, basically. Because you have the classical Latin that Julius Caesar would have spoken. Those kind of people were wiped out by the Germanic tribes who invaded. So the only Latin that was left was that spoken by the commoners. Yeah, I will say to Woodby as well. Like, if you listen, German, you can definitely tell with like languages like German, Dutch. I mean, people often make jokes about how Dutch basically sounds like a West Country farmer trying to speak English while drunk.
Mitch, what do you think about it? It's more like 20%, because that's what I think. It's more like 20%.
The thing about a lot of the foreign vocabulary within English, a lot of it's not really used that often. Like, it's very, very high-end, highbrow language, like high-end vocabulary. The words I use on a daily basis, for example, in my usual day-to-day stuff, vast majority are either Anglo-Saxon or Old Norse words. Like, for example, you know, I'm trying. It's like you don't say the word comprehensible a lot, do you? You would often say understand. Or you would say, or instead of saying complicated, you say hard. You know, that's a thing. A lot of words that we have from like Latin and Romance languages, it's not really that common compared to the older English words.
Mitch, do you know, if you said tough or you said hard, which one's English and which one is Romance? If you know.
I think they're both Old English, tough and hard. I know hard is Anglo-Saxon because the German word. Hard.
Oh, okay. So, yeah. So something like difficult would be more Romance.
Yeah, that's a French word, if I remember correctly. Whereas I don't know, it's like
I think the Latin, I think like arduous would be like the Latin definition for like hard or difficult.
Yeah, or
that makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah, and it's I mean this is one where I can get into a rabbit hole of like going, oh well, what if the Normans never invaded? Because if the Normans never invaded, English nowadays would be like, I mean, I often say that English, in terms of how we sound, is basically halfway between Dutch and Danish. Like that's how I would say English is in terms of how we sound. The only thing that makes us weird as a language compared to like our neighbours is the fact that while we're a Germanic language, you've got so many foreign words kicking about. But that's only because of Norman conquest, really. If the Norman conquest never happened, we would not be borrowing so many words from Latin and Greek.
Isn't a little bit, Mitch? I don't know this. You know way more about languages than I do, but isn't a little bit of English also down to the Romans?
By the time we came to England, I think we Anglo-Saxons, the Roman civilization was all in ruins. So a lot of Latin words we have. I mean, it's like there were some Latin words you had before the conquest, but I mean, you got the word church. That comes from Greek, if I remember correctly, for the church. You had some words that come from the church, but it was only really after the conquest.
Yeah, I mean, diocese. I mean, a lot of it was reintroduced by.
Diocese is definitely Latin.
It's Roman,
guys,
yeah.
Can I just interrupt you? This is really interesting. All right, I find this one of the most interesting things, largely because I don't know much about it. But just to interrupt you, I want to do a little bit of channel admin stuff. Guys, please like the stream. It really helps. It helps us a lot with the algorithm on YouTube. And that's important. And also, if you want to support the channel, you can do so via Entropy, and there's a link pinned at the top of the chat. You can also ask super chat questions there, which I will make sure we answer before the end of the stream. Sorry, guys. This linguistic question I find really interesting, because one of the reasons I love English is it's possible to be more precise in English than almost any other language. And I think it's because we have this mixture of Germanic, Norse, and Latin terms. But you guys feel free to disagree if you want to. I don't mind.
I would say with English before the conquest, like you'd have, like, let's say 2 or 3 words of the same concept, but the grammatical gender would differ. So you'd have like 2 words to say the same. Let's say tree, but depending on which word you use, like one word would be like feminine, which denotes, because it's feminine, it has a lot more emotional significance to it. Whereas if you use the other word for tree, because you had like I was like, yeah. Whereas the other word would be neuter, so it doesn't really have that emotional significance. So Old English poetry, I would say, it's far better than modern English poetry. I would say, because I know, like I know Io's neck of the woods, like in the southwest, because when you look up, because for example, we don't have gender in English these days. It started in Northern England and then Yorkshire, because of basically the problem was the Scandinavians, like the Danish, they come in, they start speaking their language. The main barrier towards communication is basic grammar stuff. Like, for example, we gender a tree differently compared to how the Danish would gender a tree in their native tongue. We just go, okay, scrap gender altogether as a concept of grammar. It spreads around the north, then seeps down to the Midlands, then seeps down the southeast, and then southwest is the last area to abandon it. But not even like Dorset, why? In like the Georgian period, they were still using like grammatical gender when referring to, because it's like I know, like in parts of southwest they say that grass or that hair or something like. They don't say the grass. Like when you're talking about like a name, that's like a mass noun.
Mitch, I know that you and AI will both know the very famous Anglo-Saxon poem, "The Wanderer," for example, which it's just a great poem. And I'm not very much into poetry, but that one is, because you kind of get it. I mean, particularly if you're a former soldier, you spend your whole life after you leave, you're trying to get back to that situation in some ways. I'm not talking about fighting. I'm more talking about comradeship and this kind of stuff. But yeah, you guys know much more about that than I do.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to sort of like a West Country dialect, the Cornish is different to what you maybe you get in Somerset and Dorset. Devon is sort of a mix between the two. I mean, I guess with the Cornish, there's of course that Celtic, that strong Celtic influence there, um, which is similar to obviously to Welsh and say Devon, you got like the mix. I mean, what one thing, one sort of saying that I when I was living used to hear is uh, what was it like it be this or it be that sort of thing. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
I would say like because it's like people. I mean one thing about one thing about Norman French was even like before the conquest, there was quite a lot of Old English influence into Norman French. Like for example, the word business literally just means busyness. But the Norman French were using that, and it's like, and also you notice even before the conquest, there was some Old English names that were being used by the Norman French. Edward being one of the
Mm,
main ones because of Edward the Confessor, and this is why, of course, Edward Longshanks is named so because his father Henry III. He believes that the Normans should trace all their like the post Plantagenet should trace all their good fortune to Edward the Confessor, whereas in an alternate
yeah.
time, yeah, and it's
Um. Oh, one thing I do remember is there's a word which I used to hear in Devon. Um, if you want to say something soon but not not right now, you'd say dreckle. You say dreckle, and then of course like girt would just be another word for big. Like some you hear nowadays like girt big as like a way to clarify, but the word girt would just mean big.
yeah, I
Um,
know. Like there was some words like in my because a black country, like my way of speaking of a black country way is reckoned to be one of the closest to what old English. So, for example, one word we have word is cack, but cack means so cack is there's also cack is also a German word, and cack in English and German both mean crap. Basically, like if you want to describe somewhere as looking dirty, you say this looks like cackhole or
yeah.
yeah, or another thing is uh yeah, it's another yeah.
It,
That's interesting, Mitch, because when I lived in
uh,
South Africa, Afrikaners used to say "kak," which was rubbish. And yeah, you're right. That word's English too, and it means
the,
crap,
the,
basically.
there's also a West Country influence, and maybe it's from the Americans. If you live in the South, like in the American South, you might hear like we have something called obviously like the famous West Country one, which you've all heard is "All right, me lover." That's like a quite a well known sort of common phrase. You also have "All right, me kid." They refer to someone as kid, which just is like a greetings, which and some like that is also transpired to parts of America as well.
Um,
And you hear
AI, can I ask you? That's interesting. All right, my kid, right? Now, kid, many people think that's an American word, but it isn't. It's an English
no,
word that got
yeah,
transferred to America. Yeah, because in like Newcastle, they'll say "all right, kid," and it means a young person.
yeah, yeah. Um, I just um, yeah. The only one other word I think I remember um in Devon, you'd have like for someone who was I mean today they say like if you're like a tourist, but it just means outsider, is a grockle, and in Cornwall they were called emmets, which means the same thing. Today though people will say, oh, that means tourist, but it just means outsider, but they don't like it. to be used in that connotation, because it assumes that there is some blood connection to be Cornish and Devon. You have to have there has to be some sort of genetic blood tied to the land.
Woodpit is saying that kid is used in Boston Irish communities a lot. I tell you, kid was very common in England. It was common in London. In the northeast, people used to say "our kid," yeah,
There's
all the time. It was very common.
There's a few. Well, of course, Plymouth, being the epicenter. Where did the Plymouth Company go? It was Boston. It was New England, right? So that's quite interesting. And there's a lot of places in Devon that shares names with places in Boston. What's now Boston, and other areas of New England, and maybe in upper parts of New York.
I'll just say to Dissident Knight in the chat, because he's a member of my Discord and a friend of the channel. There are some good studies of Australian English, and you'd be surprised where so many Australian words come from. A lot come from London, and part of that is because a hell of a lot of the convicts sent to Australia in the early days came from London. It's the biggest city in Britain. But also, there's a lot, and some places where you think there'd be a lot, there isn't, and some places where you might not think there's a lot, there's a load of influences from different parts of Britain in Australian English.
That's actually a good thing I was just going to raise, because I remember this. I was watching a clip of Australia, like you see like old Australia from like the 1930s or what have you. And there was an interview of people, I think in Australia, it was after the war in like late 1940s, and it was like people walking about. There was some chap who was interviewing people on the street of like topics of the day. One thing I noticed is that the accents on all of them, you could hear the Australian twang, but it did sound like remarkably still English. It wasn't as pronounced as it is, I mean, today, for example.
I know. Another thing is like one thing that's weird is so we have number one, but back in like older forms of English, you say "an," like that an would be the old way of saying one. So like for example, so back in Old English, you say "on to," "on twi," "on twi," and "three," and so on. But yeah, for some reason we just say the word, we end up saying one, even though it should be pronounced like "on" or "an," because it's like you have, for example, German "eins," or Afrikaans have like "ein," and some have like "ein," and so like when you say "an egg," it's like it's also other monikers. We don't say "good one," you say "gooden." Like that "un" part, basically, it's just like an old way of saying one. But that's about back when, instead of saying one, you say "un," like how the Germanic language you say "ein" or "eins" in German. So, and yeah, it's like I know, like, because it's weird how child and kid technically mean the same. It's just that child is one way of saying the word, while kid is closer to the German word "kind." It's just
I noticed. I noticed, Mitch. Someone in the chat said, "Oh, her kid is actually a juvenile goat." Yeah, fair enough. But actually, like kid, kiddo, kiddie are all English expressions that are commonly used in various parts of England.
Yeah, as key book is with Black Death say the English language, and I go. To be fair, the Normans weren't going to destroy the English language, but certainly like, modern English as we have it happened the way it did because of the Black Death. Because basically, so after the Black Death, there was a lot of internal migration. Like loads of people moved to London, and loads of accents mixed. Like you have Midlands, you've got Southwest, Southeast, and North. They all mixed in London and Essex area. So that by the time Geoffrey Chaucer writes his Canterbury Tales, he's doing so in this like sort of English that basically becomes a standard because it's a blend of all these different accents and dialects. Because at this point, you got a factor of to get from one end of England to the other would take you ages. Back in the time when the country was thickly wooded and the roads weren't that developed, so back in the Industrial Revolution, before canals, it took longer to deliver something from Liverpool to Manchester than it did going on a ship from Liverpool to Boston in America.
Oh, yeah, absolutely true. Key Buckley is saying legal documents were written in French, Latin, and Hebrew before English. I'm not sure they were ever written in Hebrew, Key Buckley. I've got to say, no.
There were. So this is the thing. I've read in monasteries and in monastic areas, there were transcribes of works into Hebrew.
Someone's saying check the pipe rolls. Well, maybe, but I mean, I know English used to be written in legal terms in certainly in Latin and also probably in Norman French. But as far as I understand, one of the key things that made England was that one of the English kings later down the line allowed everything in English courts to be done in English, and I don't think Hebrew was ever a big deal.
Yeah, Edward III was the first guy to let the courts use English, because before that, all court business and documents were all done in French and Latin. Then you had Henry V, who ordered that the bureaucracy write all their documents in English. They never used French from that point onward. I believe Latin was still used, but up until George I in the early 18th century.
That sounds about right to me, Mitch. Yeah, that's my understanding.
I mean, the only thing I can think of, I'm just having a look, like documents written in Hebrew. Of course, when William did bring Jews to England, because of course there were no Jews in England beforehand. So legal documents may have actually been written in Hebrew.
And who kicked them out of AI? Another king kicked them out, wasn't it? Edward III, wasn't it? Longshanks.
Edward, yes, Edward Longshanks. At the behest, though, it was at the behest of English merchants and barons, particularly barons. They actually wrote to Edward and they said that
pure coincidence, mate. Pure coincidence.
Well, they said that they accused them of, well, it was on multiple things. One was contents of the Talmud, but that's a separate matter. We can't get into that on YouTube. It was usury. And the mismanagement of it wasn't even mismanagement. It was like sort of just over, and
then I think I'm right in saying it was that arsehole Cromwell who brought them back. I'm sorry, he's an arsehole as far as I'm concerned.
Coin clipping as well. So debasing the currency. There was like, and this the thing is. To say historically speaking that this was just like it was just sort of some like low level religious bigotry. I mean, yes, there was like bigotry on a local level, but on the wider scale, there was a reason why all this happened, and there's a reason why this happened in Aragon and Castile and France and other places over history as well, because
like.
Yeah,
scores of places, actually.
It takes two to tango. Let's say. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like I said, I is the JQ real? Yeah, I think it is, especially in America. But it's not my major deal. I got other things I care about a lot more. But you know what? I'm not a Ben Shapiro fan, and I never will be, or a Douglas Murray fan for that matter. But you know, this stream has gone all over the bloody place.
Actually, I'm sorry to interrupt. Woodput said that kings in general. Now you'll love this one. Kings in general. I mean, they have taken the money. In their latest one, they talked about. I think it was links to the new Europa 5 game that sets in 1337. They talk about brief about the Black Death and the spread of it at that time period, and they say like places like Poland, for example, were remarkably didn't really suffer as a lot of Western Europe and particularly us. And they say it was down to the Jewish community's hygienic practices, which was incorporated by the wider population.
What when Poland literally just closed their borders in the midst of
Bohemia, literally Poland, Bohemia did that. There was so many forests. There was and also you had the Carpathian Mountains for a start.
Yeah.
There was so many natural land barriers. That's why it didn't spread to Russia that much either. I mean, there were several waves of it later on, but Lithuania, that entire region was free. But when I was watching, I actually I mean, it more fool me for watching it, but I just thought, oh, this looks quite interesting. I'll just check this out, and then I just saw that, and I was like, what is that? So what in the new EU5 is there going to be like a debuff if you decide to expel them? Like, sorry, your cleanliness level goes down 10 points.
Yeah, I can't say that I've ever seen anything historical that ever said Jewish people were more cleanly than anybody else, to be honest with you.
Yeah. And Woodpit's right in Bohemia, because they were well known for the silver mining, which made it a wealthy nation. Yeah, they were banned from literally the entire trades and craft. There was total banning.
I gotta say, guys, look, this is not the Pete Crahoney's channel, and you are not going to get 75 episodes of 200 Years Together on this channel. You're just not. I'm sorry, because it's too tedious for me.
We can try. We can try.
No, I'm not going to try, I've got to say. But I've seen some of those episodes, and they're quite interesting. But yeah, I look. I don't give a shit about Israel. I'm completely neutral about Israel. I don't care who wins out of Israel and Palestine.
We are the biggest supporters of Israel on this channel.
No, I'm an Englishman. I don't care. Honestly, I really don't care about Israel and Palestine. And I detest Ben Shapiro, but that's just me.
We all follow we are all British Israelites of the 19th century version. Wink, wink.
Speak for yourself, eh?
No,
you are okay.
No, I'm Duke. I'll explain it to you later. It's not what you think it is. But
I get it, mate. I get it. I do get it. But honestly, I don't detest Israel. I don't hate Israel, but I'm nothing to do with Israel. And I wouldn't have the RAF defending Israel either, which Chutia Kersdama does. He does.
We've spent how many history streams have we talked about England and many other European countries, but England in particular? And you have people like Douglas Murray, people who know better. They aren't low IQ shitheads that produce slop on a daily basis. They know better, and they have. I mean, they say with a straight face,
they just
if this country doesn't exist, Western civilization collapsed. Fuck off. Western civilization has never depended on them. It is. I mean, fundamentally, it started with the Greeks. If you want to go back, if you want to start,
Israel was created in 1948, and I'm pretty sure that England goes back, way over 1,000 years.
I mean,
we didn't. I mean, it's like we didn't have any Jewish presence before the conquest, and I would say some of our best years were, for example, with Alpha the Great. But I think people in chat are saying about how with So the harrying of the north, like you know, because we
But
are.
look, guys, look,
Yeah, sorry,
we're talking about history, and we are going to come back to the harrying of the North by the end of this stream. I do promise you, gentlemen. But
Well, actually,
I got
Key Buckley. You want to forget about the harrying of North. Let's talk about the 21st century post-war harrying of Europe. Let's talk about the harrying of Europe for a second. No,
well,
I'm
okay,
joking. I'm
but
joking.
this is
I'm
hang on,
joking.
hang on.
I'm
Yeah,
joking.
I
I'm
know, mate,
joking.
I know.
I'm joking.
William Grenville AI, I don't disagree with you, but let's do that on a weekend political stream, okay? But yeah, I don't disagree with you. I have no room for many of these people,
Yeah.
not least people like Douglas Murray, who, are, as far as I'm concerned, are scumbags. But
Well,
you know, so's the British Prime Minister, so's the conservative, conservative in air quotes, Nigerian leader, and many other people who I have no time for. But whatever. Let's come back to the harrying of the North because we probably should. What I would say is that what actually happened in the end was that the Anglo-Saxons, and I suppose you could say in the north, the Anglo-Danes, they actually, rather than being run by the Normans, they actually, in the end, kind of like absorbed the Normans because there weren't many of them and they were only the top few people. I don't know what you guys think, but you what do you think?
well, yeah, I mean, within a generation, or within like 20 years, 20, 30 years generation, the entire elite, and I don't just mean like earls, even down to just like the sheriff level, like the sort of sheriff scribe level, even, the peasantry was all, the native Anglo Scandinavian population, and then um the sort of administrative and the sort of ruling elite level was Norman, um maybe Flemish, odd French, but it was Norman. um I mean, of course, you did start to have in the following century, into the 12th century, Normans, families mixing with Anglo-Saxons, so you sort of had the, um you know and then of course you have like the Anglo-Norman stock that were somewhat romanticizing of the Saxon past, but also sort of fusing the Norman and Saxon identity together, and the modern, what you come into the English identity, for example. I mean, the Norman identity never really, I don't think you could say the Norman identity really ever superseded the Anglo-Saxon identity, because afterward, the Norman house just went extinct, and it was, you had the rise of the Angevin Plantagenets, and so the dynamic there changed. I mean, all you had though was, the I would say the English identity did sort of win out in the end. Um, well, up until recent times at least. But yeah, I will say though, I do want to talk about briefly that at this time, at the time of William's the Harrying of North, a lot of the areas, particularly in York Minster, Jarrow, um, of course, the ruins of Lindisfarne, but also in places like Scarborough and Whitby, and particularly Whitby, these were centres of Christianity in the Anglo-Saxon world, and to be honest, they were actually like key centres. Many of these places were set up by Irish monks, and then administered by Anglo-Saxon monks, and these would be obviously, Jarrow being the famous place of Bede, um, very important figure in Anglo-Saxon history, but also Saint Wilfrid, who was a key Anglo-Saxon figure that separated or removed Irish influence from the Kingdom of Northumbria, and there was more of a sort of a self-identity with a closer connection to Rome. That was you saw in with the Canterbury mission in the south. And so, but up until 1066, I mean, the key areas of Christianity was very much in the north. There was a lot of those key sites, key areas, and with the harrowing, that was affected as well. You had
AI, how do you square that with the fact that there were no monasteries north of wherever Mitch said they were? I can't remember what he said now, but I do know.
Which is
the monasteries were all pretty much in the south. How do you square that with that?
Well, I mean, because because between that and that, of course, you had the Viking invasion, and the rise of House of Wessex. So, I mean, Northumbrian House and the Mercia House were wiped out, but the legends. I mean, with Wessex, the legends of the Christian connections up north in and around York, Bernicia, and Whitby, it did continue onwards, and that was for Alfred's successors, but particularly Athelstan and something like that. That was a massive driving force you know of uniting the English realms. I mean, you could even say there was somewhat of a holy war aspect. I mean, I wouldn't say that, because at that point, the Danes were sort of becoming more Christianized, but there was. I mean, yes, you didn't have the monasteries, but you had the sites. I mean, yeah, they were like Lindisfarne were in ruins and things, but it was still like you still had like I think in Jarrow you still had the church. You still had like the chapel, the ancient chapel and everything.
Don't get me wrong, I like many of those places. Like Whitby is a nice town. Prospect of Whitney is also a famous English pub name. Yeah, Mitch, what do you think about that stuff, mate?
I know, because I mean, I'm not too clued up on the ecclesiastical stuff like that. I'm not really well known, but in regards to the Norman, I know, because the thing about the Normans was, even like by the mid 1070s, you had like middle rank, mid ranks of English society, like your local lords and so on, your magistrates, marrying, like, they'd be Norman, but then they'd be marrying English women. So, for example, Ulrich Vitalis, he was half English, half Norman, and by the time you get to 1100, you've got the king himself marrying Edith, or Matilda, as the Normans call her. And that kickstarts the Plantagenet dynasty, because Plantagenets, their whole shtick is, well, we are as English as Norman. That, both the blood of William the Conqueror and Alfred the Great flow within the veins of everyone Plantagenet from that point onward. And the thing was, essentially, by 1075 you have these magistrates and barons. They marry, then it goes up and up. It's like a bottom up process of like intermixing with the natives. That's what happens. So by the time you get to by the time you get to the 100 Years' War, the Plantagenet Royal House are a lot more English than not. It is a bit of a weird one, because you got a factor that identity isn't the same as what we configure it now. So when you say, oh well, this king in the Middle Ages was an Englishman, well, he might be English, but he might also be a guy who prefers speaking French, or he might prefer reading French. It's like Frederick the Great of Prussia. He was a German, but he hated the German language. So it's a bit weird.
But Mitch, I agree with everything you say there, by the way. But I would also say, if you look at someone like Richard the Lionheart, for example, who spent his first 6 or 7 years in England and could absolutely speak English, he goes over on the Third Crusade, and his army, which is, although most of his knights were Normans, not all of them, there were Anglo-Saxon knights in his force, but most of his knights were English. The vast majority of his army was Anglo-Saxon, and he repeatedly defeats the great Saladin that everyone goes on about and pretends was a nice guy, which he wasn't, but they pretend that because, diversity. But Richard the Lionheart, that was when the English warriors first used St. George as the war cry. Now, every single year we get this bollocks where lefties say, oh, he was a Turk. And of course he wasn't, because the Turks were still in Central Asia at the time that St. George was around. St. George was a Greek-speaking Christian Roman officer. And he'd been known in England in Alfred the Great's time. He was known then. But he became the English patron saint. And as I say, English fighting men first used his name as a war cry in 1189. 1189 is a long time ago, guys. Really is a long time ago.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about the whole Turkish stuff. I think what I find, I mean, is again, it's deeply. I mean, I have it's a pretty vile accusation, bearing in mind the Crusades. I mean, again, the low IQ mass mob of people always believed the Crusades were against Arabs. Actually, the first Crusade was against the Seljuk Turks. It was against the Seljuk Turks. It was against the
Well,
Turks
it was also
the Anatolians.
AI. I'm sure you'll agree with me. It was also a Christian answer to many, many, many decades of attacks from the Muslims.
Well, yeah, because from the Christian point of view, the Holy Sees. I mean, of course, you have Rome and Constantinople, but the Holy Sees of Antioch, Alexandria, Carthage, and even places like Nicomedia were either conquered or sacked by either the Arabs or Berbers or the Seljuk Turks, and
assaulted Muslims, basically.
basically it's the various Islamic caliphates or Muslim Turkic empires. And while the Fatimids were somewhat, they would allow Christian pilgrims, the Seljuk Turks, they wiped out Christian Christian
But
communities
hang on, AI.
Sorry,
I just want to point out, AI, these guys, the Seljuk Turks, were still in Central Asia in the time we're talking about. All right, they only turned up hundreds of years later from Central Asia.
So what time period are we talking about here? Are you talking about?
Well, we're talking about when St. George was a Christian, Greek-speaking Roman soldier, and even when we're talking about
Islam wasn't
Richard
around
the Lionheart and his English soldiers in the Holy Land, the Turks were still not in Turkey.
Well, no, during the time of St. George, the real life St. George, I mean, the majority of the empire was still Hellenic, Greco-pagan, probably at that point.
100%, mate. 100%.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, the eastern portion of the empire would have been largely Christian anyway. There was a lot of Christians around at that point anyway. But I mean, yeah, the Islam didn't even exist at this point.
But he sure wasn't a Turk. Anyway, no. He couldn't have been a Turk because the Turks did not live in Turkey at that stage.
I mean, if he was to be mixed with anything but Anatolian Greek, he probably would have been mixed with Armenian. Armenian
Yeah,
Greek or something
yeah,
like that.
something like that. Yeah.
If he was to be mixed, but according to all the sources and documentations, he was a Cappadocian Greek, which is which is basically like
A
an
European,
Anatolian,
basically.
European. He would have looked exactly the same as someone from the Roman Balkans or Italy. He would have been
Yeah, he would have looked
maybe
like Alexander the Great or Julius Caesar or
yeah, he probably would have
Alfred the
had
Great or somebody like that. Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
I mean, I think a lot of the earliest art form is depicted as obviously quite obviously white because they were. I mean, yeah, you had a bit like an olive skin like you have with Meds today, but yeah, we would have been white. We wouldn't have looked Arab or anything like that. No, or
100%.
Turk,
And he was
or
not a Turk. He couldn't have been a Turk.
I mean,
The
a
Turks
lot.
were still in Central Asia.
Uh,
So, you know.
when I was living in Cyprus, a lot of Turks we saw there, or when people from Turkey who were on holiday who live in Western Turkey, they don't even look Turks. They're white.
Yep, yep.
I remember that looking back now, I've always thought, oh, imagine if they did a DNA test, they'd be absolutely furious.
Probably.
It's funny actually. I think DNA tests are actually banned in Turkey because basically, like I think like the western half of Turkey, like especially like Istanbul, Gallipoli,
It's just a
and
Greek. Yeah.
Egypt, yeah, basically just
You-
Greece. You just got to assimilate. You just on the wrong side of the Aegean, basically.
Go, guys, I tell
Mm.
you now, go to Northern Italy and you'll find an enormous number of cute blonde girls. In
There's
Northern Italy, there's loads.
there was actually something quite interesting. I remember a couple of years ago, because there was a Turkish actor who did a DNA test, and he found out that he was actually like 80% Greek and then like 10% Georgian or something like that, and he was like an agnostic. He wasn't like he was like a not a devout Muslim or anything like that. He was sort of like an agnostic, and then quite secular. But upon discovering it, he actually joined the Turkish Orthodox Church because there is a Turkish Orthodox Church, very small version of it. But he
Yeah.
joined like an Orthodox because he said, "Oh, I want to read this," and then he actually, I think he ended up joining like the Greek Orthodox, and then renounced his Turkishness and just said, "I'm actually Greek. I'm just Greek." And yeah.
Reasonable. Seems entirely reasonable to me.
And I get
Guys,
it,
look,
yeah.
my final point about the invasion of William the Bastard and the harrowing of the North and all the rest of it, and there was a lot of evil stuff done in those days. But my final thing would be that the Anglo-Saxon English people, finally, we actually absorbed them. It didn't go the other way around. I think we absorbed them in the end.
That's. I mean, the main thing, Rob. I mean, you look at the English language. How many word how much the Normans changed the language? It's kind of a bit of a.
Oh,
And
sure.
why we absorbed
sure,
them
sure.
genetically. I mean, for example, culturally, I'm trying to because I don't know there's some places.
What I mean, Mitch, is that if you look for genetic traces of the Normans in the modern English and British people, you won't find many. You won't.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
there's linguistic stuff. Yes, there is. And I think you can argue, I'm not sure you'd agree with me, but I think you can argue that was to the advantage of English in many respects. But if you look genetically, in terms of DNA, if you go watch Survive the Giant videos and what have you, there's really not much Norman in the English at all these days. We're still pretty much the same people we have been for way over 1,000 years.
I would also add, because one person we haven't mentioned who was kind of key after the harrowing, he was sort of like, he put particularly northern England, which was under his, somewhat rule, in North Yorkshire and around that area, was a chap called Alan Rufus, or Alan the Red, who was who became the first Lord of Richmond. Richmond being in Yorkshire, Richmond, not Richmond in London, Greater London area. And he was a Breton lord. He wasn't a Norman, he was a Breton. He was from that retinue of Bretons, from the other Alan. So they're all called Alan, by the way. They're all called Alan. Um, and he managed to become one of he, according to Doomsday Book, he became one of the richest men in Norman England. He built he sort of, rebuilt a lot of towns, and also in York he founded St Mary's Abbey. And
Also AI, of course, the Bretons famously were originally from the Romano Britons who
yeah,
fled Britain at the beginning of the Anglo-Saxon invasion. So in a way, you could say that this dude was
Alan the
like,
Red, yeah.
an original Briton in many respects.
Yeah, and the thing there is, from what I could see, he did invest a lot of money into rebuilding Northern England. So obviously he did, he did actually care about the land and the people that he ruled over, and he was seen as like from a lot of sources and accounts. I remember Mark Morris and stuff. He was seen as like a pretty decent ruler. I mean, the Bishop of Durham was, it was a different account, because he was like I think a chap called Welcher, who was like a Lotharingian. That's like the Low Countries, like Luxembourg and Burgundy, the Low Countries today. Um, but yeah, this Alan Rufus was sort of liked by a lot of the Anglo-Saxons. He was seen as quite a fair ruler.
Yeah, that seems good. Mitch, final thoughts, mate?
I mean, genetically, the Vikings have more genetic impact in this country than the Normans. I mean, I think the Italian POWs in World War II had more of a genetic impact than the Normans.
That may be true, mate. Yeah, that may be true.
Yeah, so it's like, yeah, and it's like the Normans. It's also worth noting as well. I mean, okay, the Normans, like, they're essentially a mix of like Northern French and Scandinavian. Even if it did intermix with, it would barely. I mean, like, for example, I'm an Englishman. I've been mistaken as all men of nationalities all over Northern Europe. Like, I can be mistaken for Russian, like Scandinavian. I can be mistaken for Irish, German, French. So you imagine the
I'm
differences.
only ever mistaken as handsome, never anything else. But that's just me. I'm joking. I'm joking, by the way.
In Cyprus, we got it's really in Cyprus. My mum got mistaken for an Arab, because her skin became quite dark. People would start talking to Someone would start talking to her in like an
So
Arabic
she
or
got a
something.
pretty tan, is what you're saying there.
Yeah,
Yeah, she got a pretty tan. That's not a big deal, man.
no, but the funny thing is, when you look at like the old passport photo, I mean, she does look quite Arab in that.
There's plenty of very cute Arab girls.
Yeah,
I'm not going to say a word about that.
Yeah, it's
I went out with a Lebanese air hostess once, so Christian air hostess, I might add. But anyway,
yeah, I was just say I've got, like, my grandfather, for example. He had like curly dark hair and like swarthy skin, to a point where apparently when he was stationed, like, for a brief, I think he was stationed in Sicily for a brief while, and everyone, and apparently even like the local Italians were thinking he looked like one of them. So they're just asking like a question about and they'll ask him, and he's like, what? Like, you got to factor. I mean, even some of his mates actually, like, I want no, mates. I think like one of his officers, like a superior officer to him, actually asked him to translate some of the Italian, and it's like, well, my granddad doesn't speak Italian, but it was like genuinely thought he was Italian, because he was part, like both sides of my family got Welsh ancestry, and you get that strain of Welsh people who have darker
We
skin.
talk about dark Welshmen, and these days, of course, the BBC will cast a West Indian or an African for that, but all it means is someone with dark hair, basically, and brown eyes.
Yeah, it's like that was pretty much like a lot of men in my dad's side of the family have that, like where they might have darker eyes and might have like really dark hair, but and it's just that's just I don't know. But they take DNA tests, and it's like 80% British Isles, and the other bit is just different strands of like continental European, like Northern Europe.
100%, Mitch. Yeah, I know. I entirely know what you mean, and every real British person knows exactly what you mean. So don't worry about that, mate.
I think curiously, the funniest thing is Americans who don't get it. Like some Americans you see who think that all swarthy people must be like from like Southern Mediterranean or something.
Which is weird
yeah.
when you think how many like Italians and Spanish and Greeks the Americans got. It's weird that they don't get it. You can be European and dark-haired. Very strange to me, that one. But anyway, and also I've always rather liked Italian and Greek and Spanish girls. Some of them are really beautiful. So I don't care.
Yeah, it's like Catherine Zeta-Jones, right? Some people.
She's a dark Welsh girl, but is she Mediterranean? No, she's Welsh.
Well, apparently she's 12% Greek, apparently, but that was I said that's like a few generations ago, to the point where it's not within memory. So,
okay. I've got to answer this one, guys, and I know you two guys will also. Cheddar Man was a con thing by the BBC. They made his skin twice as dark as it should have been.
It wasn't the BBC. It was some homosexual academic during the time of BLM. What he discovered is, actually, this guy shares DNA. The Cheddar Man shares DNA, which was common to several people, including one person in the area. This means that there is some connection to continuous land, people being at the same land as together, and sort of what you could say an indigenous population. So he deliberately, and he admits this in his fucking blog as well. He deliberately the melanin on it to make him black. That's all he did. He deliberately fabricated.
He made the guy's skin like 3 times blacker than it really would have been, and he did it on purpose. And the BBC just put this out saying, there were black people in Britain. Yeah, sure they were, all right, with blue eyes. But all right.
Yeah, it's but I think Survivor Joy says along the lines of if Cheddar Man was alive today, he basically looked like Javier Bardem, or like basically you think like the average Spanish bloke, swarthier skin, might have
much more like someone who is Spanish or Portuguese. Yeah, absolutely, Mitch. I totally agree. And those are white guys, one of my best mates when I was in the SADF in the South African military in the old days in the White Army. One of my best mates was a Portuguese guy from Mozambique, and trust me, he was a white man.
I would say with the Spanish and the American, I know in America, like their government still considers to be the Spanish as not being white. So perhaps Spanish ain't the best example.
Yeah, but they don't mean Spanish, Mitch. They mean Mexican, which is mixed with Indians.
Yeah, but it's weird how Spain is not considered white, but Portugal is.
No, it's not Spain. It's Mexico, Mitch.
No, as in Spain. So Portugal and France, for example, are considered white countries in terms of the official American government, like how they classify races. But for some reason, Spain isn't, and I don't get
it. Must be to do with Mexico, and of course, in Mexico, you're looking at Spanish people mixed with local Indians. So I guess in America's case, Spain, that's got to be that, because Mexico used to be Spanish. I would imagine, anyway.
Yeah, but it still doesn't make sense because you also got Portugal being considered white, and they've got Brazil, which is even worse.
Yeah, is there much of a difference between average Portuguese guys and average Spanish guys? I doubt so.
No, there won't be. I mean, so yeah,
I don't know. Whatever. All right, guys. I don't know what we're going to be doing for our history stream next week. I'm waiting for my wonderful Discord to tell me what we're going to be doing. And if they don't make a decision, I'll do something about South Africa, which I can always do. Thank you very, very much to my guest this evening, Mitch, and also AI, aka William Granville. Mitch, is there anything you would like to plug, sir?
I don't know if I should mention this, but basically, on the 30th, Absolute Majesty is doing a stream about part of Japanese history, and I'm to be his guest on it.
Well, look forward to that, mate. That'll be really good.
Big.
Please remind us before it goes live, because I'll give it a plug.
What era is he just doing, like all the way through?
I think it's the Magi, isn't it?
He's doing it about the Catholic Church when the Portuguese landed up until when they isolated.
That'll be interesting.
I've been recently watching the recent adaptation of Shogun.
Terrible.
That
It's terrible, William Granville. The first one is much, much better, I've got to say.
I've only watched
the
a couple
recent
episodes.
one. I thought the recent one was crap. The first one was pretty good.
I will say, like, the recent series. I mean, the first episode, right? You've got a guy being boiled alive, which I just thought that's just milking it. Like that, you're just basically taking a leaf out of Game of Thrones and The Boys in terms of just being brutal for the sake of it. But and also, it's not even just
the girl and the Englishman don't even like each other much in this recent one. It's crap, and the whole thing is it's supposed to be a bit of a love story, you know.
Well, the other thing is, so the idea of being boiled alive, right? The Mongolians did that, and even then, they only did it for like really scummy traits. Like if you were a paedophile in Mongolian society, then yeah, you get boiled alive.
Good.
But the Japanese, I don't think the Japanese ever did boiling people alive, and if it did it, they used it very, very rarely. They wouldn't use it for like a pirate. Like, if you're a pirate, you just get beheaded, and that's just.
I don't particularly like Richard Chamberlain as an actor, but I do agree with Keith Buckley that that version of Shogun is a much better version, really much better. And the Japanese girl in that version is so damn cute.
Like, yeah, the other thing I don't like about the only other thing I don't really like about the more recent version is how everything was always there's no color. That's the only other thing that bothers me. Like, you know, I mean, you look at Akira Kurosawa films, there's a lot more light, where in terms of uniforms and a lot of architecture and so on, and the sky, whereas it's just everyone does it the past like 10 years or so. Everyone's always doing
look, everyone's going on about Christopher Nolan's film coming out next year about the Odyssey, and I am not looking forward to it. The armor and the clothes that the guys are wearing are absolute shit, and also there's loads of race swapping in it. Like, Athena is supposed to be an African. Yeah, all right, I believe it.
I mean, I was watching Troy and Alexander. I watched Alexander, the film, the one that came out in the early 2000s, same as Troy. And I know at the time they were not given, they weren't like received well. But looking back, particularly Alexander, I mean, the battle scenes were pretty spot on.
Yeah, some of those are good. I don't like a lot of the gay stuff in that. Again, not a lot of evidence for that, but you know, whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's bits that are good. It's a very long movie. There's good bits and bad bits, but yeah, fair enough. But yeah, this new Nolan film about coming back from Troy, I think that's going to be awful.
Oh
You
yeah,
know,
it's gonna. Yeah, I
Yeah,
have.
no, Woodpit, not Troy. This is not Troy. This is the Odyssey coming. Is it the Odyssey?
yeah, it's with Matt Damon, isn't it, playing
Yeah,
Odysseus?
yeah. Hang on, but I'm trying to think now. There's the two. There's the two books that are really famous, and it's one's the Odyssey. What's the other one?
The Iliad.
The Iliad, and yeah, this one I think is the Odyssey, but the armor is like it's all leather biker armor that the Greeks would never have worn, and like I said, like Athena's a black woman. Yeah, all right, okay. I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
it's
I am not going to watch that and pay money for it at
well.
all because it
I
looks
mean,
shit.
the thing that bothered me was so I saw some Mediterranean types on Twitter. They were having a go about how they always cast Northern European guys like Matt Damon as like the Greeks, and it's like okay, it's like with Rome, right? You have Ray Stevenson who plays Titus Pullo. I mean, I think most Italian blokes look like Ray Stevenson. Like if Ray Stevenson was born Italian, no one would blink an eye because
Yeah, and
he doesn't look too different
he's
from
also
Italian.
not really supposed to be Italian, Mitch. He's supposed to be from a bit north of Italy, and his mum was a slave. Isn't that right?
Yeah,
Well,
no,
most of Italy at that point was had been settled by various Celtic people. I mean, of course, they sacked the very early Roman Republic, and so I mean,
That's why Ray Stevenson is a good horseman because he's not an Italian. He comes from a bit north of Italy, really.
yeah, I mean,
In Rome, the excellent TV series, which I really like, by the way. Yeah, there's historical inaccuracies in it. Yes, there is, but it's a brilliant TV series.
yeah, I mean,
And
I would say it, yeah, it's pretty spot on, and the. I mean, even to this day, I mean, I know Romans today. I think it was Survivor Jive pointed out actually that Romans, towards the end of the Western Roman Empire, um, had more like Lebanese, probably from the intermixing between the Phoenicians of Carthage and uh, and the Italic people. There was so much intermixing throughout the empire's history that um, you know, and depopulation during the Gothic Wars that that's why you have that sort of close connection.
I have to say to Woodpit 420 in the chat, I detested the duel, and it wasn't kind of feminist; it was totally feminist.
I've never watched it.
Yeah, I've watched it sadly, and I'll never watch it again. It was detestable, and it's just a feminist movie. If you want to watch The Duelists, that's a good film by that guy, but that's the only one I'm going to name. But yeah, William Granville, aka AI. Anything you'd like to plug, sir, in terms of your own channel or anything like that?
I got my channel. Also, just Nathan and the others at the Pendragon have really been going quite hard with this, and I have got potentially some very good news coming up. I can't announce it
Cool.
at the moment, but
Don't tell me you're going to buy a castle, William.
well, no, we're not going to buy it. We're actually going to conquer it. Duke, if you could come back to
even
if you
better. I
I
hope when you get to the top, there'll be a St. George's flag and a Union flag.
Well, I say, Duke, I need you to get the old mercenary network, come over with a small force, and we'll meet up, and then Mitch can raise a few guys,
Cool.
and we can go on we need to conquer a castle. No, I'm joking. We're not. We're in talks, and we're talking with old aristocratical families who have long ties
Oh,
um,
nice.
with
Nice.
with this. So, I mean, for me, this is. for them, it's all looking very good. They've been really amenable. So I'm really pleased with this, and we're going.
All I ask of you, AI, is that when you get this, you stick a St. George's flag and a Union flag next to each other on the top. If you do that,
Uh,
then I
well,
will give you as much publicity as I can.
I well, I'll explain after the show, Iron Duke, but maybe the Union flag, maybe the St. George. Well, I'll explain why. Maybe that might be a bit awkward afterwards, but yes, certainly. Oh,
Well, I
absolutely.
mean, if it's in Wales, the Welsh flag. If it's in Scotland, the Scottish
Yeah,
flag.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
fine.
yeah,
That's fine.
yeah. Of course, if we're going to be in like Wales, Scotland, or even Ulster, we'll put
Yeah, you put the other
the
flag
correct.
there as well. You put the
I'm
local national flag as well. Absolutely,
and by the way,
100%.
I have said in the group, if we do get a picker like a castle or location, we are putting the real Ulster flag, the real Northern Irish flag, up. I know, and and the thing is, I know there are Catholics and everything in and everything, and I get that, but that is the flag of Northern Ireland. It's Ulster, it is Ulster, and that
Absolutely,
is the flag of Northern
100.
Ireland, and yeah, it's the Saint Patrick, it's the red hand with the Saint Patrick's and the crown. That is the real flag of Northern Ireland.
100. No argument from me, mate. No argument
Yeah,
from me
I mean,
whatsoever.
I would quite happily put up the royal standard of what as well. Though I don't think we're allowed. I don't know if we're allowed to actually if the monarch's there. But yeah, either way, we'll be putting up the correct flags each
Well, I hope this works.
country.
This sounds really good, AI. Really, I really like Nathan Hood. He's a good man. I like his organization, the Pendragon Foundation.
Mm.
And if you guys succeed, good on you. Good on you.
Yeah, and when it comes to purchasing castles and everything, I mean, as I say, just watch this space because there are a few places that Nathan's been looking at, and I think it's happening soon. It's gonna be soon. It's gonna the ball the
Good.
w- w- what's been achieved, and he's been talking to a lot of people. He's been doing a few streams recently, which I'll get out there. But what he's achieving now is something which I didn't expect to happen. We none of us really expect to happen in so quickly, and we've got such a great team. I've got a good chap under me who was in my team, so I'm really pleased with the volunteers. I mean, they're excellent.
Well, I will just say this to you guys. I was talking to Ataman about this, and I know Ataman was involved a bit in the early stages of this.
Yeah,
And I must be careful what I say, but I know Ataman felt when he first joined, which was very early times in this, that there wasn't enough support. So if there's a bit more support now, I reckon you'd get Ataman back, and
yeah.
there's no better Englishman than Ataman. I can tell
No,
you what.
I mean, what happened was that about a year ago it started, and what happened was that the organization just wasn't there. There were too many chiefs, there were too many people. We had a lot of, I mean, and this is the problem, you have a lot of content creators who want to join, but then they want to use that as a platform. Like the type of people that just like to join
Yeah, I know
groups. They
exactly
they
what you mean.
they
Yeah.
just want to join groups and socialize and do their own thing. And that happened, and Nathan had the really good idea of actually just shutting the whole thing down and restarting again with people that he
Cool,
knows who he trusts.
cool.
And look, I mean, it isn't nepotism. It's not. I mean, even if it is nepotism, it
Listen,
doesn't.
AI, all I would say is if you can get Alman back, get him back, because I don't know a better Englishman
I
than Atman. He's a good
I
guy.
mean, what I'll do is I'll reach out to Atman, and
Go
I'll
for it,
reach
mate.
out to I'll
Go
reach
for it.
and I'll speak to I'll reach out to Nathan. First of all, I'll reach out to
Oh,
Atman, see
and
if
also Mitch, of course, and people
yeah.
like Aaron Hook, really good guys. Go for it, mate.
Yeah, I mean, they can reach out. I mean, instead of me being the intermediary, if you know, Mitch Atterman, if you're watching, and Aaron, if you're watching as well, reach out into to Nathan or the Pendragon directly on socials, and go on from there. Because quite frankly, we got volunteers, but we always need more, and you know all you guys live.
Good stuff, AI. Honestly, I'm so happy because, as I say, Nathan is a really good guy. He is a member of my Discord. He doesn't say much on there, but he is. But he's a good guy, and yeah, I'm happy that you guys are going well. That's really good.
No, that's good, and you know, we will. I hope to show of something. We're going to show something pretty good in the future.
Cool, mate. Would you like to plug your channel at all, AI, before we go?
Yeah, William Grenville or AI Shiratori, it still comes up as the same thing. I recently did a stream on John Bagot Club, and there was a couple of American nerds, history nerds, who struggle to understand Bagot Club's theory of you know, the actual spiritual aspect of an empire, ironically. um and
Yeah.
yeah, and you know, particularly they all sort of had a massive hissy fit over the date that he gave us, like the end of the Roman Empire at 180 AD. So I explained why he gives these dates of 200 to 300 years, the date with the British Empire in 1950, and also you know, the Arab empires as well, because he was particularly he is probably the greatest Western source if you want to learn about Arab history. He has such a depth of knowledge of Arab history.
I've got to recommend Bede of Britannia if you want to look at Arab history. He's also excellent. I know you've done stuff with him, AI.
Yeah, I mean, he was it was Bede that actually brought me on to Glubb, if I was and of course Glubb was he was the sort of like the commander of was it King Faisal of Jordan or something like that?
The Arab Legion. It was
Yeah,
the
the Arab
only.
Legion.
It was the only Arab force in 1948 that was well enough trained to give the Israelis a good fight.
Yes, and well, number one, a lot of those American accounts that were trashing Glubb also happen to be, you know, might have a reason to bash Glubb, let's say, for their own,
Yeah,
like, yeah.
they might be a bit Ben Shapiro-ish, shall we say?
Yeah, there was a couple of Steens and Bergs in there that were
Yes,
trashing
indeed.
him. So
Yes,
yeah,
indeed. No. Glubb was a very brave British officer with a distinguished record in World War II. And yeah, he was in charge of Arab soldiers, but that's who he was in charge of. So what?
no, true.
You know, if you're in charge of Arab soldiers, you should look after your Arab soldiers, in my view. But, you know, whatever. Guys, thank you very much to Mitch this evening. Looking forward to that stream you're talking about with Apostolic Majesty about Japan. I think that'll be most interesting. Thank you very much to William Grenville, aka AI. And again, with the stuff with the castles in Britain and also on your stream. Guys, thanks very much for joining us. I knew nothing about this. I learned quite a lot this evening, which is, this morning for me. But anyway, that was really cool. Someone saying Glubb's mother was Irish. So what? So was mine. What you got to say about that, mate? Anyway, don't care. I'm going to play us out of a tune, if we'll play. Let's see.
That's the drinker della la non avevo col senza scuola balla staccava ieri scuola di found tre con me a detto te alle senda scuola avalla staccavalla ieri scuola di found tre con me a little day I'd let you go
And that, of course, was
in the morning, Casablanca to.
That's a different song. You have to know 32 Italian to know that song. Anyway, yeah, sorry guys. That was, of course, from Patriotic Archive. Great channel, friend of the channel, member of my Discord. Really great music on there. Go and check it out. It's interesting that the English and the British more generally were always known in the old days for being quite a jolly people who were not downtrodden and in bad, you know, they weren't downtrodden and kept dirt poor by the aristocracy. That is not what the English and British people were known for. They were known for being quite jolly and having a good time. So anyway, again, thank you to my guests, Mitch and William Granville, aka AI. I'm not sure what we're going to be doing for a history stream next week. Although if we don't come up with anything else, I'll do a South African subject, which I keep in reserve for when I have to. But we will be back on Saturday for our normal Splendid Isolation stream, when we will look at British current events, politics, and news from a right-wing point of view. And I think we're probably the main channel that does that these days. I like to think so anyway. Anyway, guys, go well and take care. And in the meantime, don't let the bastards grind you down.